Hey everyone, welcome back to Secret Sonics. This is episode 90 with Ruby Smith. I had a great chat with Ruby. We talked about a lot of things, including balancing artistry with being a producer and an engineer for others. We talked about working out of big studios, learning from mentors. We got into her approach to mixing, why she loves analog reverbs. We talked about communication and finding community and a lot of other things. So I think you're going to love this conversation. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Ruby Smith here on Secret Sonics. You're listening to Secret Sonics, a podcast exploring the creative side of music production. Join us weekly for honest conversations with real-world music producers and audio professionals. Hello, and welcome back to Secret Sonics. I'm your host, Ben Wallach. My guest today is Ruby Smith. Ruby is a music producer and recording/mixing engineer. Having spent the last few years in London, Ruby cut her teeth engineering in commercial studios like Red Bull Studios and Noah Tune Studios, and running at the legendary Strong Room Studios. Ruby is now based in Berlin, producing and mixing for various artists, engineering at Red Bull Studios Berlin, and engineering at a music university. Ruby is looking forward to scheduled releases in 2021 with Freddie Dixon, Sand Dunes, Post Dusk, Philip Brooks, Austell, and more. Ruby actually won 2 awards for her production work. In 2019, she was named overall winner of Shure and Red Bull's Soundscapes competition, and she received the Madison Square Garden's Up and Coming Artist Award. Ruby has engineered for artists such as Coda Banks, Laidback Luke, Coco Roco, Sand Dunes, and many more. Former guest of the show, Katie Tavini, recommended I reach out to Ruby, who's graciously agreed to join me on the air. Welcome to Secret Sonics, Ruby.
Hi, yes, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So tell the audience a bit about yourself. Obviously, I introduced you a bit, but why don't you tell us a little bit about your story with music, how it began for you, and kind of how that evolved into audio?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. I mean, a lot of that sums up what I've been doing in the last kind of years, but I sort of first got into music and music production pretty young. When I was 12, my mom got me Fruity Loops to use on the home computer. So I sort of started doing a lot of electronic production very young and throughout teen years. So it all happened pretty organically, and doing things like collaborating with friends and working on my own artist project and playing instruments and just actually making music for a long time. So I did a lot of that before I got into kind of studio engineering stuff. And so then it was quite a good natural progression for me when I then was sort of hiring professional studio spaces just to work on more music. Then other friends needed someone to record their vocal for a track. So I'm okay, cool, let's go in and do this. And then it just kind of happened more organically from there, and then sort of got a few in-house engineering jobs and things like that. And then that's when things got really busy, and it's doing session after session and sleeping on the floor and all of that fun stuff. I guess that comes under the cutting your teeth bit.
Yeah, for sure. Right?
Yeah,
we all go through that stage where we're just up all night working.
Yeah.
You have to.
Then you have to be back at 8 a.m. anyway, and you're okay, well, I guess I'll just sleep here. If I want to get 4 hours sleep, maybe that sounds good.
Oh, wow. That's more hardcore than I ever did. So,
good times. So it was a great few years in London doing all of that. And I moved over to Berlin sort of end of 2019 before kind of lockdowns hit and all of those things. So it's been a bit of a change here, I guess, with the change in the world, but also it's just a different kind of landscape here, studio wise as well. So I still do a little bit of in-house stuff and some things for universities and things, but I've really focused more on producing with artists and writing with artists and mixing, and work a lot more directly with artists and their managers and things like that too, which is good. I really like that.
That's awesome. So now you're probably working more at home studios or just in a bedroom, that kind of stuff, as opposed to a multi-room facility, kind of what you were doing in England.
Totally. And because I was quite fortunate to work in such great studios in London, that was amazing to have all this gear at your disposal. And then it's kind of having to work out, okay, how am I still going to do all of this? But we have budget to get in the studio for a day or two to do some vocal tracking or something. So it's been a lot of making the most of like what can I do from home and like get all of that done, and then what can we go to the studio for? All right, we can do that there, and then working out how to do things remotely as well. I have an amazing drummer, Chrissy Lopez, who's in London, and she's been doing all the like remote recording stuff for me. She has a like great room set up there, and so I just send drum stuff over to her and she plays it and sends it back, and it's great. So just been working on how to do different things, and it's pretty amazing, like just being able to download drums. They're already recorded.
Yeah.
You don't have to set up anything.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've seen businesses like and there's websites like Sound Better and stuff, which has its pluses and minuses, obviously.
Yeah.
I think it's best if you can have a relationship with a musician that you could just like be in touch with on a personal level. But
yeah, exactly.
It sounds like you're doing the hybrid approach that most people are doing these days.
Yeah.
You're like the kind of, we have a home setup and you go to the studio when you can afford it, and kind of, I feel like that's what most modern producers are doing,
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think especially at the moment that like you have to be home more, that it's just like it kind of makes sense just to do this. So, and I mean, for me, like where I was at, like it just also makes sense for me just to work more directly with artists and build those relationships and work on that. Like studio engineering is amazing and it's different people coming in and out, but at the end of the day, like you're working for the studio. And so like I really like that and appreciate that, of being able to like keep and continue and like build on those relationships working with people.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really cool that you kind of upped and like moved to England to get, start working in these like bigger facilities. Like what made you make that decision to kind of leave Australia and be like, I'm going to England. Like, let's do this. Like what was the impetus there?
To start off with, I didn't know I would go and like move. I thought like maybe I'll go for 6 months or something. I sort of had the opportunity that my sister was living there. I was just finishing up uni and I'd just been working for a little while. And so I thought, okay, this is probably like good time to go see the rest of the world. If I have a chance to now, I should probably go and do that. So I thought I might just go for 6 months or something. But yeah, I got pretty settled in there. And then it was just sort of, I'm really glad that I did that, because the kind of communities there in London with music and engineering and production, like going over there, I knew decent enough about music production and things, and was performing, playing shows and like putting music out and stuff in Australia. But then it was sort of being able to have access to those like amazing studios, so many people to learn from there. I just like the amount of growth in like a shorter amount of time. I just don't know if I would have like learned as much if I had stayed in Australia.
Well, I think that's something that's missing for a lot of up and coming producers who don't do that, is kind of like that experience working with people who are better than you, who know what you don't know.
Yeah.
I know that this is something that I totally missed out on when I was getting started, and it just makes everything much longer learning curve.
Yeah, I definitely found that like in Australia too, it was hard to get opportunities or like people to learn from around you as well. And like it sort of, I had a few friends that did some like music production things and stuff too. But like often just didn't quite feel like included in things, or like that I could go somewhere. I mean, it's sort of small studios and stuff like that. People are all kind of doing their own thing, but it was really hard to be like, how am I going to work out how to like get better at this? So it was a lot of just like on the internet or like doing a few things with a few friends and stuff. It just seemed like I couldn't for some reason.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's also partially because you're from like Brisbane as opposed to like a bigger city, maybe like Melbourne, where there's like probably a more rich music scene, right? I don't know.
I mean, Brisbane's doing pretty well with music stuff. I think it's just like a little bit, I mean, there's a lot of great artists coming out of there. Super amazing artists, actually.
Cool.
But it's just not the same thing as like the big studios in London and that, and being, there's kind of pathways to sort of find a way into that. And where it's just not quite the same thing. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I've only been to England twice.
Yeah.
But both times I went there, I really felt like the culture of England just appreciates music more Meaning, it's not that the musicians are necessarily more into it or that, the musicians are better there, but I feel like the whole culture as a whole in England is just more appreciative of music as an art as opposed to the other. Like, I don't know, I saw billboards for like, this is like, I don't know, the age of Spotify, but I saw billboards for like, artists. And like, you don't really see that in Israel and not even so much in New York.
Right.
But like, there's like billboards for like music. It's like, wow,
True.
these people really love music,
Yeah.
I mean, most of my favorite artists are British, to be honest. Like,
Yeah.
Whether it's the Beatles or Radiohead and stuff like that. But
yeah,
there's something in the culture
Yeah.
that I think is good there,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was amazing too because so many of the bands and artists that I grew up listening to were all sort of from the UK as well. Like a lot of my favorites, like The Cure and things like that too. And then like when I was finding out more about like what mixing engineers do I like who mixed this record that I like, and then sort of finding like, oh, where was this recorded? Like, oh, it was this place in the UK or something, and like finding out that like, oh, Alan Moulder mixed most of the records that I love. Okay, that's interesting. And I'm like, wow, I live in the same city as him. That's cool. Which is cool when you're from the other side of the world.
Yes, absolutely. I remember going outside of Abbey Road and just being like, okay, this is like hallowed ground. Maybe one day I'll enter.
Yeah.
That day hasn't happened yet, but
I'm sure there'll be a time. There'll be a time. Yeah.
I hope so. Well, I wanted to ask you, like, how did you get your first, like, whether it was internship or job at one of these bigger studios? Like, how did you get that?
Well, the first kind of place I started, like this place, No Tune Studios, I started hiring the studio myself, just as like a share thing to have a like day a week there, and like go use the gear and just to like work on my own music and like work with some friends and stuff like that. So I started doing that and then just helping out around the studio, and they would have some open night things. So it was really just like helping out, and it's a good little community there, and doing those things. I mean, in a studio, there's a million little jobs and stuff that need to be done. And so it was just sort of offering help and doing those things. And then it was just kind of building up and being like, yeah, I'll do some of this. And, starting on some like voiceover recording sessions or something, like podcast things, like doing some of those things, and then you prove like, yeah, I can do this, and it's like, okay, you can have this session will be good for you. Okay, you can do so. It's just sort of building up from there. Then other things, it was sort of word of mouth from people that I'd work with. That was a great session I did with this artist Coda Banks, who's an Australian as well, and she was in London at the time. But it was just really handy that her Coda and her manager were over in Red Bull Studios at the time too. Like they were recording there the next day, so they just let the manager there know, like Coda was just coming in, talking about the session she did last night and doing that. And so the manager just put me in touch there, and so I ended up getting put on a session there, and just sort of went well. And then you kind of get called back because you're all freelance. It's just sort of, if you go in and you do it and you get good feedback, then they might call you back again. So it's just sort of seeing it's not really like an interview process. I never really had anything like that. It was just sort of you come in, and if you don't like fuck it up, then
they call you back.
Then maybe they'll ask you to come in another time. It was sort of after like 3 months working at Red Bull that I was like, hey, I think I like have a job. Like that's wild. Like
it was like very casual.
Yeah, after like 3 months, I'm like, yeah, I'm here all the time. Like I guess I kind of work it, don't I? That's cool.
Nice. Well, I guess the lesson there is making connections and networking and getting to know people,
Yeah, just being
within
like
your local scene.
Yeah, just helping people, staying in touch with people, being a nice person. Like, I think that goes a long way. Just being chill as well, like not being too intense when you go into something, like just being calm.
Yeah,
also,
people like to say if you're a good hang, that's good. Like if you're just a chill person to hang with.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say? I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Oh no, it just like I think it helps, especially even things like doing some running stuff at Strong Room. Like it's a big, amazing studio, and like so many things there. It was sort of only really started not long before I had to leave London. So I regret that I wasn't able to hang around there more. But it's stuff like that as well that people sort of need to know, that you can go in and you're not going to be like, oh, actually, I know how to do this. And